On the 20th of October, 2025, before dawn could even break over Donetsk, the deadly sound of engines broke what was remaining of the peace in this fragile area. At nearly 5 a.m., Russian armored vehicles, motorbikes, and quad bikes erupted forward toward Chasiv Yar, a town that's become one of the bloodiest flashpoints of the war. But waiting for them were the soldiers of Ukraine's 24th Mechanized Brigade, a unit known for its accuracy. Within minutes, the sky filled with smoke and fire as Ukrainian forces unleashed a coordinated defense that tore through Russia's assault columns. By the time the dust settled, the battlefield was littered with twisted metal and silence. 20 Russian soldiers gone, several armored vehicles reduced to scrap, and yet another assault repelled. This was more than just another attack. It was a message that Chasiv Yar stands unbroken. The Russians came with bikes and steel. The Ukrainians answered with strategy and resolve. But behind that brief official report lies a bigger question. How are Ukrainian defenders holding firm against increasingly desperate Russian assaults? And what does this battle reveal about the shifting momentum on the Eastern Front? Let's break down what really happened on that cold October morning in Donetsk. At 8:20 p.m., the air around Chasiv Yar was thick with the smell of wet soil and gunpowder. The evening had been deceptively quiet, the kind of silence soldiers know never lasts long. Ukrainian units of the 24th Mechanized Brigade, the same brigade named after King Danilo, were stationed along the tree lines, their eyes tracing the distant horizon. Everyone knew what was coming. In those long hours before contact, time seemed to slow. Soldiers checked their gear again and again, adjusting optics, loading magazines, and scanning the tree line for movement. There wasn't much talk, just quiet focus and the kind of alertness that comes before a storm. The stillness felt unnatural, the kind that makes every sound, every rustle of wind, feel like the start of something. The Russians had been testing this sector for days, probing the defenses with small groups, drones, and artillery shells. But this time, Intelligence Units 9 are fast, chaotic, and designed to overwhelm through speed rather than strength. The plan was clear from Moscow's side. They wanted to break through Chasiv Yar before the Ukrainian winter position solidified. Capturing even a few blocks here would give them a height advantage over nearby valleys and access to supply routes toward Kostiantynivka. But what they didn't expect was how ready the defenders were. Hours before the assault, reconnaissance drones from the 427th Separate Regiment of Unmanned Systems, codenamed Rayrog, picked up unusual movement patterns, long lines of dust rising in the distance, the low metallic silhouettes of BMP-1s and MTLBS glinted under the faint moonlight. Analysts traced their route on live screens and sent coordinates to ground command. Every Ukrainian soldier in the sector went on alert. By 4:45 a.m., the Russians began their push. Engines roared across the wet fields. 2 armored MTLB vehicles led the way, their hulls wrapped in crude metal cages to ward off drones. Behind them, a swarm of quad bikes and motorbikes followed, each carrying 2 or 3 soldiers, clutching rifles, RPGs, and grenades. It looked reckless, almost desperate, but this was their new tactic: mobility over protection. The sound came first, a deep mechanical growl rolling across the open terrain. Then the flashes of muzzle fire as Russian gunners began suppressive shooting. They wanted to force Ukrainian defenders to take cover while their motorized units sped forward. But the Ukrainians didn't panic. Hidden among tree lines and trenches, gunners from the 24th Mechanized Brigade held their fire until the last possible moment. When the lead vehicles crossed the open stretch of ground near the industrial zone, anti-tank teams unleashed their volleys. 2 BMP-1s burst into flames almost instantly, black smoke curling into the night sky. The rest of the Russian convoy didn't stop. The motorbikes zigzagged, trying to outpace the explosions, but the terrain worked against them. Chasiv Yar sits on uneven, muddy ground. The October rain had turned open fields into slippery traps, quad bikes skidded, crashed into ditches, and stalled under heavy fire. Then came the drones. Operators from the 427th RAROG Regiment released their first swarm of small, fast, FPV kamikaze drones equipped with explosives no larger than a grenade. They flew low, hugging the ground's contours, invisible to radar. From above, thermal cameras captured them streaking toward their targets. One by one, the drones found the motorbikes and quad bikes, exploding on impact with terrifying precision. By 5:15 a.m., the assault began collapsing. Ukrainian electronic warfare crackled to life, cutting through enemy frequencies and blinding Russian command. Orders got lost in the static. The lead vehicles, now burning wrecks, blocked the rest of the column from advancing. The Russians tried to retreat, but Ukrainian artillery began its part. From the western ridge, the thunder of self-propelled howitzers broke the silence as the 18th Sloviansk Brigade of the National Guard opened fire. Their shells didn't aim at soldiers directly. They aimed at escape routes, supply trucks, and backup units forming in the rear. Every road, trail, and forest gap the Russians could use to fall back was bracketed by artillery fire. Each blast sent shockwaves through the ground, splintering trees and overturning vehicles. The coordination was seamless. Ground units, drones, and artillery were communicating in near real time, each move choreographed within seconds. From the skies, drones hovered, relaying heat signatures and vehicle movement to fire control officers who adjusted their aim within seconds. The assault that was supposed to punch through Ukrainian defenses had turned into a trap. By 6 a.m., the battlefield was chaos. Smoke from burning vehicles mixed with the gray dawn mist. The quad bikes that survived the first drone wave tried to weave between craters, but another squad of Ukrainian drones descended, hitting one after another. It was surgical, almost unreal. When the smoke cleared, 2 MTLBS and 2 BMP-1s were eliminated. Another pair of armored vehicles had been hit while approaching and were forced to retreat. The ground was littered with twisted metal and burnt-out engines. Ukrainian drones hovered quietly above, filming the aftermath for confirmation. 20 Russian soldiers were confirmed neutralized, and 11 more were severely injured. Most of them never reached the front line. Their motorbikes had carried them only halfway before the first wave of strikes hit. The Ukrainian soldiers later described it as a moving shooting gallery. Inside the city, soldiers of the 101st Guard Brigade of the General Staff provided overwatch, scanning for a second wave, but it never came. Whatever momentum the Russians hoped to build had been shattered within that first hour. The survivors pulled back east, leaving their deceased and vehicles behind. For the Ukrainian defenders, it wasn't just a victory. It was a demonstration of adaptation. The Russians had tried to use mobility, believing smaller, faster units could outmaneuver heavy defenses. But Ukraine countered with data, drones, and patience. The result was an ambush disguised as defense. By 7:30 a.m., as the sun began to rise, Ukrainian troops emerged from their positions. The ground was still warm from burning engines. Soldiers checked for mines, recovered drone footage, and gathered the remnants of Russian weapons. The smell of diesel and scorched metal hung heavy in the air. One soldier from the 24th Brigade reportedly muttered, "They came fast, but they left faster." The phrase spread through the unit like a quiet badge of pride. The day didn't end there. Drones continued to patrol the skies long after the smoke had cleared. Ukrainian analysts replayed footage from the night, marking every obliterated vehicle, every detonation, every heat signature that confirmed a hit. These weren't just records, they were lessons. Later that morning, headquarters released a brief report. In the area of Chasiv Yar, the enemy attempted an assault using armored vehicles, quad bikes, and motorbikes. The attack was repelled. The defense of the city continues. Behind that simple statement lay hours of coordination, precise strikes, and a quiet kind of brilliance that defined Ukraine's evolving defense strategy. This battle, though small on the map, carried symbolic weight. It showed how Ukrainian forces had learned to read the rhythm of Russian tactics. Every assault had patterns. A feint here, a noise barrage there, a desperate rush for speed when heavy armor failed. The defenders had learned to exploit that. The quad bike assaults, once seen as an innovative Russian maneuver, were losing their shock value. On open terrain, they became easy prey for FPV drones and artillery-guided fire. Operators sitting miles away tracked their every movement through infrared feeds, steering drones straight into the speeding bikes with deadly accuracy. On narrow paths, they bottlenecked. The Russians had traded armor for agility, but in doing so, they made themselves vulnerable to precision strikes. Each new attempt felt more desperate than tactical, as if Moscow was trying to invent surprise where none existed anymore. Ukrainian soldiers understood this deeply. Each time the Russians tried a new trick, the response came faster. In Chasiv Yar, that meant pairing real-time drone intelligence with grounded, disciplined fire control. The soldiers didn't shoot wildly, they waited. Every shot had purpose. Every missile was meant to count. The collaboration between brigades was what sealed the outcome. The 24th Mechanized Brigade held the line. The 18th Sloviansk Brigade delivered timed artillery support. The 101st Guard Brigade ensured command stability, and the Rayrog Drone Regiment turned the skies into a deadly battleground. By noon, the battlefield was quiet again. The only sound was the distant hum of Ukrainian drones and the slow crackle of burning wrecks. Medics from both sides moved cautiously through the debris, retrieving the wounded. Ukrainian soldiers worked in silence, their faces tired but resolute. The Russians left behind not just bodies and equipment, but evidence of their struggle. Many of the decapitated vehicles were covered in improvised anti-drone armor, metal grates, welded cages, and sandbags tied to roofs. It was a sign of how much drones had reshaped this war. Machines once designed for mobility were now weighed down by fear of the sky. Behind that fear was something new: Ukraine's growing mastery of the invisible battlefield. Drone pilots, coders, and analysts worked together to turn each skirmish into data, refining strike algorithms and jamming frequencies in real time. Every destroyed vehicle became a lesson. Every intercepted radio signal a glimpse into the next Russian tactic. The war was no longer just fought on the ground or in the air. It was fought in code, precision, and information. For Kyiv's command, the Chasiv Yar engagement wasn't just a tactical win. It was a case study. Every demolished BMP, every jammed communication channel, every intercepted signal fed into a larger algorithm of adaptation. The Ukrainian military was no longer reacting. It was predicting. That shift from reacting to predicting is what makes this battle important. It's no longer just about who has more men or tanks. It's about who understands the flow of battle, who learns faster, and who adapts quicker to a war that changes by the hour. In Moscow, the failed assault was brushed off as a small setback, but analysts knew better. The loss of 20 soldiers, multiple armored vehicles, and a failed breakthrough attempt in a strategically vital area meant one thing: the front line had hardened. Every failed Russian assault consumed fuel, manpower, and morale. In Chasiv Yar, the defenders gained something intangible: confidence. Confidence that their coordination worked, that drones and discipline could outthink brute force. As the day faded into evening, the soldiers returned to their trenches, exhausted but alert. They knew another attack would come eventually. That's what war in the Donbass had become: a cycle of assaults and counter-assaults, measured not in kilometers gained, but in hours survived. Still, Chasiv Yar stood. The defense held. The city's silhouette remained unbroken against the horizon. And as night fell once more, the soldiers cleaned their weapons, charged their drone batteries, and watched the same dark fields where the assault had begun just 24 hours earlier. Somewhere out there, the next wave was already forming, but so were they, ready, patient, and unyielding. For the defenders of Chasiv Yar, survival wasn't luck, it was skill. precision, and an unspoken promise that no matter how fast the enemy came, Ukraine would always be faster in mind. As the smoke settles over Chasiv Yar, one truth stands tall. Bravery can't be conquered by firepower. Every battle tells a story of strategy, courage, and survival. If you want to keep uncovering the untold realities of this war, please press subscribe and stay with us as history unfolds. One front line at a time. Front line at a time.